It ain't the left side or the right side, then it must be the fin side. It ain't the left
Thank you,
side.
Solo D. Welcome to another episode of On the Fin Side here with Kat and Paul. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and on Spotify. Check out our merch store on thefinside.threadless.com. This is our final position group ranking. Be sure to check out our other episodes where we go position by position with the Dolphins bend on their needs and how the board is shaping up, not only in the first round, but all the way down throughout the rest of the draft. Players I like, players that Paul likes too. So as we look at the defensive back group, Paul, it seems like the Dolphins have a good starting six with Minkah Fitzpatrick, Rashad Jones, and TJ McDonald at safety, as well as Xavier Howard, Bobby McCain, and Eric Rowe at the cornerback spot. But because the Dolphins are going to have 7 or 8 defensive backs, they're certainly going to have more defensive backs on the field. And looking at this safety group here, it seems to be a group that in the first 7 or 8 players, you could see 7 or 8 safeties go in the top 75 or 80 picks of this NFL draft, and then it kind of goes off a cliff from there. So who are some players that really stuck out to you as ones that you like?
Well, I mean, 4 of the top end really were Jonathan Abram, who I like, but I actually had a little bit below Nasir Adderley. Again, I'm gonna harp on this till I'm blue in the face. But my feeling with Brian Flores and Patrick Graham is that they just want the best football players they can, and they'll scheme themselves around what they get. So I wouldn't be shocked if they were to make a play for Adderley. I mean, he plays so violent. He makes some great reads. He's an amazing athlete. You watch some of the interceptions he got, and he had no business getting that football. And if you watch him, he is always reading the quarterback in the passing game, which is huge, and it's something that you need to see. I know he ran a 4.6, but, I mean, he plays a lot faster than that time. And just I can't just stress enough how violent he is playing the game.
So let me throw it back to you on that, Paul, because it's a question I've been asking myself, and I know it's a question a lot of listeners have been asking themselves too, is so the coaching staff has not said where Minkah Fitzpatrick's going to play. And maybe he's just a guy without one true position, but I don't really believe that. I think he's either going to be a free safety or a boundary cornerback. So if Nasir Adderley, the Dolphins find themselves in a position where they can draft him late in the second round or deep in the first round after a trade down, then are you going to kick Minkah out full-time to that cornerback spot?
I'd be willing to, or potentially, I mean, it may be a scenario, unfortunately, as much as I don't want to say this, because I'm a huge Rashad Jones fan. I mean, he may be the heir apparent to Rashad Jones. It's TJ McDonald may become expendable. It gives the Dolphins some flexibility for what they can do. And I mean, you can scheme for a 3 safety look pretty easily with what they've got already. So adding a talented player into the mix is a good problem to have. So I'd be willing to kick Minkah out to the boundary. I think positional flexibility is huge, as I've been beating a drum on for years, let alone throughout this draft season. And to have a little bit of that flexibility with what they can do, I'm a fan of that.
Yeah, and especially in this defense, it's easy to have a 3 safety look. I mean, take a look at what the Patriots have done the last couple of years with Duron Harmon. I mean, he's got 2 safeties ahead of him, and Patrick Chung and Devin McCourty out there, but he's on the field more often than he's not. And in a year, maybe 2 years, Rashad Jones and TJ McDonald are both going to be off this team, and you would have a hell of a safety duo back there, which allows us to slot in a couple of safeties and a couple of cornerbacks into these spots here if the board falls that way. A guy that I am absolutely smitten with is Chauncey Gardner-Johnson out of Florida for that very reason. I mean, even though he is not a true boundary cornerback, in fact, he doesn't play out there at all, and he's not a true over-the-top free safety like an Adderley could be, I watched 3 or 4 games of his right in a row after watching him throughout the college football season, and you can tell when a player just gets it. When the ball is released in the quarterback's hands, he's always in the right position. He's always in the right spot. He's a fantastic playmaker. This past year, he had 4 interceptions, 3 sacks, and 2 touchdowns. And that's pretty hard to do in the slot as a college defensive back. You see some of these cornerbacks may go through a whole season without getting an interception. So he's somebody, too, that I think if you're playing a 6 or 7 defensive back look, get him out there, insert him somewhere, and he's going to make sure that he continues to make plays on that. So in a deep trade down into the first, he's somebody that I would look at, and probably not at 13, and it's not impossible he falls to 48 either, even though it's pretty unlikely at this point. Somebody else, 2 other players I like too, Juan Thornhill from Virginia. This is somebody who, on paper, just wondering why this guy's not a top 10 or top 15 pick. I mean, last 3 years at Virginia, 13 interceptions, 26 batted passes. He can play cornerback. He can play safety. He ran a 4.42 at a 44-inch vertical, 11.8 broad jump. I don't think he's as quick twitch as a Byron Jones was coming out of UConn, but he's also a lot sturdier too. He can pack more of a punch at that safety spot. The question is whether or not he's going to be a dominant player either at cornerback or safety, or just be pretty good at both positions. But either way, he's somebody I would certainly take a look at the back end of round 2. Another guy as well that I really like throughout the process, who does on the field remind me of Rashad Jones, is Darnell Savage from Maryland. He, moving forward and packing that pop, he really has that wow factor, but he also has the athleticism if asked to cover wide receivers going down the field. So I think he has a hint that he could play that over-the-top safety, but he didn't really do that at Maryland. But man, oh man, could he pack a pop moving forward. And because he's pretty raw coming out of Maryland, it may take him a year to adapt to the NFL game too.
Yeah, and I'm completely with you on Juan Thornhill. I mean, he's a guy that one of my notes that I have on him is that he reads and destroys, because he does tend to get his nose into about every single play, whether it's in the run game, pass game, etc. I mean, he plays the ball beautifully, as you illustrated, and the guy was a turnover machine at Virginia, and he always seems to have good position and coverage, whether that's him making it up with his speed, or whether that's him just being sticky and staying with somebody. So he's got everything I love in a safety, and I think he could be that heir apparent, or even you put him and Rashad out there with Minka over the top, and you've got a hell of a defense out there. Another guy that really stood out to me throughout this process was Zedrick Woods out of Ole Miss. I mean, he's another guy that positions himself really well. He reads the quarterback and reads the play beautifully out there. And it's funny, this is something we usually hear more out of you, but if you were going to draw what you would expect from a safety for them to look like out there on the field, he just looks like a player. He looks like what you would draw if you had to draw your prototypical safety. And I can't say enough good things about the guy. And he runs a 4.29 from the safety spot. So speed would not be an issue for this kid.
Yeah, when I looked at Zedrick Woods, he wasn't what I thought he would be on tape, because I was expecting to see a very thin, a very fast player. In fact, I saw somebody that didn't look like they played at 4.29 speed. I mean, very few people do at safety, or else they'd be playing cornerback. But I saw a more cerebral player that plays with a lot more awareness. So, yeah, he's somebody to keep an eye out in those mid to late rounds. And 2 players that did not stand out for me. I mean, and it's been pretty constant, even though they're the top 2 safeties on some other boards. Number 1, Deontay Thompson. If you looked at mock drafts before the year and really during the year, you would have seen him in that 10 to 20 range. And throughout the whole process, in the last 4 or 5 games of the year, where I really wanted to see a great safety so the Dolphins could maybe be tempted to take a player like this and pair him next to his old teammate Minka Fitzpatrick in the draft, I just didn't see that. Not only did I not see a player I was wild with, I also really saw a player I didn't think was very good. He took poor angles all the time. He has choppy hips. You know, the only upside to him is maybe he can be that overhang free safety, but I don't see a player that can really come up and line up with tight ends or line up with wide receivers on a down-to-down basis. I think you need to have some of that as a safety in today's NFL. Don't see that with Deontay Thompson. And then he injured his hand and then refused to run the 40 time when everyone needed to know how fast he was. And his vertical was only 32 and a half inches, or 32 and a half or 33 inches. And that sometimes, typically if you have a 33-inch vertical, you don't go out there and you run a 4.4. So probably not a very athletic or fast guy either, but he does have some length to him, but that's pretty much all that he has. Taylor Rapp at safety, I actually do like him as a player, but I can't get over the fact that out there on the field, he doesn't line up and take out wide receivers a lot, and he runs a 4.72 in the 40-yard dash. There's too much that can go wrong with a player like this. I mean, even though he has great awareness, and yeah, he's a football player, et cetera, if you go out there as a rookie and you get hurt or you get caught up in the numbers crunch, sometimes it's hard to – sometimes a player like this is not even as good of an athlete as some players that you find as undrafted free agents. So even though he's a good football player, I think there's too much that can go wrong with the Taylor Rapp. That's why I'm not interested in drafting him in the first 2 or 3 rounds.
Yeah, and I'm going to give you a player I liked and a player that I didn't like when I was watching tape here. Mike Bell out of Fresno State, he's kind of hulking at 6'3", 210, and only runs a 4.6, or 4.67, apologies. He does have a tendency to jump routes really well. I mean, I wouldn't ask him to stay man-to-man with anybody down the field, but he does have a tendency to read, and when you said a cerebral player, he definitely seems to be, because he always seems to be in the right position. He fills well in the run game, and he plays extremely physical out there. And if he does manage to make the read the way he usually does, he does tend to get his hands on the ball, and he does have good hands. A guy I did not like, I'm going to be honest with our listeners. I started watching tape on him, wrote the word meh, and drew a line through him. And again, anybody that listened to our last episode will remember we talked about Kentucky. Same thing. Darius West, the safety out of Kentucky, ran a 4.39, 5.11, 2.08. He just didn't stand out to me on tape in the first few games I watched, and I just, didn't bother going further with him because it's just, I think meh says it all for him.
It's funny you mention West because I actually like the guy opposite him in Mike Edwards. I mean, I actually, right in front of me on my TV, as you were talking, I was watching Mike Edwards' third game. I see a crafty type of player that I could see fitting very well into this defense. I mean, I'm looking for kind of Patrick Chung types of players here. And that's why I could like Taylor Rapp, except I'm not drafting him in the second round. I think Mike Edwards could be had in the 4th or 5th round. He actually turned out to be he tested out as a little bit better of an athlete than I thought that he would as well. So, I'm thinking that he's a very crafty type of player there at that safety spot. I could see him being maybe that third type of guy and seeing if anything goes from there. So, Paul, that's going to do it there for our safety group, and I look forward to seeing how many of these players can fill the Miami Dolphins depth chart, whether it's late in the draft or as an undrafted free agent. And that will do it for our final positional breakdown of this safety group. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and on Spotify. And if it's not on the right side and it's not on the left side, it is on the fin side. Sola D, take us home.
It ain't the left side or the right side, then it must be the fin side. Inside. It ain't the left side or the right side, then it must be the fin side. Listen, Dolphins fans across the land all tuning in to see what